Come January 25th, a mugshot law goes into effect here in Korea that makes public the pictures of criminal suspects. So what is behind this latest law? What are pundits saying about its adoption? And what are its broader implications in fighting crime and ensuring safety? Welcome to Thursday's edition of Issues and Insiders. I'm Min Sunhee. Come late January, law enforcement authorities here in the country will be able to share with the public mugshots of those arrested for heinous crimes without their consent. For more on this, I have Attorney An Junseong here in the studio with us. Mr. An, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Welcome. Thank you.
I also have Professor William Hayes at Gonzaga University live on the line with us. Professor Hayes, it's also been a while with you. It's lovely to have you back.
It's very lovely to be with you. It's a pleasure this evening. Thank you.
Right. Mr. An, we'll start here in the studio then. Let's begin with the details of the so-called mugshot law, which looks to go into effect later this month.
Yes, as you said, the Korean mugshot law will take effect on the 25th, which is the 2 weeks from today, right? Well, interesting about the mugshot also, typical, well known as the police photograph or booking photograph. We often see that in Hollywood movies, right? When you take arrested and take a picture, right? Mandatory. And then that's very interesting because there's cultural and legal difference between Korea and U.S. And Korea was kind of, I think there's some reason for the human rights issues concern and other things, different police procedure, right? And then it's kind of there's a debate on whether should we get U.S.-style mugshot system because that there's a concern that there's that it might be overused, abused by some other, some people group or people taking some advantage of, about their photos in the future, and then could be a prejudicial effect on the later trial. So it's going to be has been a hot debate on the issue, but Korean government finally decided to take action, and from the 25th will take. Very similar to U.S. system, is a mandatory requirement for the arrestees to take a photo when they get arrested. But however, there are some conditions met, right? There are three prong tests should be applied. First was that there be a serious, that harm occur, and also there's the sufficient evidence to prove that the person is guilty of the crime charge, right? And then lastly, there's public interest, the strong public interest to do it because there's the concern about the human rights, issues, the violation also. So there was the prosecutor. The point is that now the prosecutors or the police have a full discretion whether they could take a photo or not. Before that, you have to go through like some committee process, have it become the optional now. And from 25th, it become optional. We can go through that process, but now the police now have a full discretion whether we want to take a photo or not. And then, as you said before, that we need to get consent from the arrestee, disclose their photo. And then recently, about two suspects actually they agreed to disclosure of their photo, so that we see that from I think 2 days ago, and some two suspects their photo was released, right? So from 25th, there's no consent requirement. But however, that's not all crime, right? There's some certain very serious crime and there's sex crime or the felony issues, and a lot of issues, very heavy crimes, right?
Right, I see. And Mr. An, before we delve any further into our discussion, for the sake of our foreign viewers, perhaps you could tell us a bit about the events that led to the implementation of the mugshot law here in the country.
It's very interesting because whenever I go to the government offices and they ask me for the national ID, and then very often they look at my face, I say, is it you, right? It's very common happen. It's same thing with when the passport situation, when I go to some overseas and they look at my picture and say, oh, is it you? Same person, right?
Is it because it was photoshopped?
Not necessarily there's fabrication. It's more like I'm saying that the people change, and then Korea actually the cultural issue also that there are some they have a Photoshop, some application used very often, and now not only Korea, because now it's the SNS, right? There's many apps, right? The people they changing their face, and you see that on the offline. Oh, is the person on the SNS, right? So very often happens. So I guess things that be very concerned that used to be that in Korea when people identify someone, we use a national ID card or the Korean driver license. But however, that for example, is my mother, she's like 80, but her photo looks like 40 when she was taken when like 40 years old. So when they show the photo, it's like, oh, it's like the same person, right? They check the birthday, ooh, right? It happens. So I guess that there's some significant time lag between actual when the crime happens offense happens, and then actually the taken used as evidence is where sometimes a big gap, sometimes surprise like 10 years. So it's very hard to say it's the same person. It's very difficult to do it. So I think it's very the pure idea. The main idea is that simply to accurately describe, show them who is the person arrested actually, so that the future reference, and then they think about happens that there's even among the investigators, they make sure there's the same person that they're talking about, right? Could be some different persons with the same name, could be same name, right? Or the similar name, so that they should accurately describe that the person arrested, and they keep the record so that they can see it. Also, however, they have to only keep 30 days. Online.
So the picture needs to be taken 30 days upon arrest.
Well, there's when they decide to disclose the photo, it have to be within 30-day time frame before after their decision, right? So it have to be within 30 days, right?
So very recent picture.
Yeah, very recent, within 30 days, right? And then also when the government disclose the photo, right, the mugshot photo, they can have up to 30 days. So after 30 days, they have to shut it and take down.
Right, I see. Professor Hayes, could you share with us a brief history of the mugshot before we advance any further?
Sure, we have to go back to the 19th century, the invention of the camera, photographic processes. So at that time in the United States, there was a very famous detective called Alan Pinkerton. So he was the first one to really use photographs to begin to compile a kind of database on criminals. But really, this kind of modern systematic use of it, we have to go to France. So in the 1880s, there was a French police officer named Alphonse Bertillon. And so Bertillon began to use a kind of biometric approach. He wanted to take down physical measurements, physical descriptions, and then he started using the camera. And he's famous for what we normally think of as the mugshot. So you have a frontal picture, and then you have the profile picture. And that system remained in place, and it began to spread to other law enforcement agencies throughout Europe and the rest of the world. In the early 20th century, the advent of the fingerprinting began to replace it. So the Bertillon system began to diminish. But what we kept was the frontal and profile picture. And so that's remained in law enforcement agencies around the world, and it remains a basic way of establishing evidence about the suspect. So today, the mugshot basically serves several purposes. First and foremost, it's identification of a suspect, especially for witnesses or for victims. And then secondly, like I said, it provides a photographic evidence to be later used in court. And then finally, it's become a public tool for both police agencies and media publications. And that's really where we get into the social consequences of mugshots. What's the real societal impact of it? So while technology and methods have evolved, particularly with digital photography and online databases, that fundamental concept of the mugshot, it's with us, even though it's only 140 some odd years old, that's what remains with us. And that's a brief snapshot of the mugshot history.
Right. Professor Hayes, mugshots, they're made public before a suspect is convicted by a court. Now, there's much debate over the purpose of this particular public disclosure. What are your thoughts regarding that?
Well, in the U.S., right, the release of the mugshot, it actually varies. It depends on the state, depends on jurisdictions. As you know, the U.S. system is very decentralized. It's a decentralized political system. And so that's why it varies from state to state. But you'll be surprised that we don't have a federal law on the release of mugshots. Mugshots and arrest information are considered public records, and it's under our Freedom of Information Act. So police departments, government agencies like the FBI, they can post this information online. Hence, last August, the ex-president Trump, his mugshot was released in Georgia. So instantaneously, only 90 minutes after he entered the police system, his mugshot was all over the world. So it can be embarrassing like that, or in Trump's case, he actually made a lot of profit off his mugshot. But some states, again, like in New York or California or Utah, have actual laws that restrict the release of the mugshot, and they protect the privacy of the individual. But other states like Florida or Texas, they allow much more open access. So the mugshots are available online. And again, the purpose is really twofold, just like you're describing in terms of the South Korean mugshot. First and foremost, it's promoting transparency. We know the system is working, the criminal legal system, and the police are releasing the mugshot. The police often argue that it actually helps them. It helps them with maybe having new witnesses come forward. Maybe the public feels a lot safer with the circulation of the mugshot. But in our actual research of it, we don't find a lot of evidence to support it. So it has a lot of critics. And our concern is really about the protection of the individual, their reputation, future opportunities. And so we really think about this mugshot really in kind of a triangle. What's the real right of the public for public safety? What is that degree of transparency that is needed by the public? And then how do we protect that individual rights, the rights of privacy, and most importantly, this presumption of innocence?
Right, indeed, which is a topic for a whole new debate, of course, then. Mr. An, where do you stand on the debate over public disclosure of mugshots prior to being found guilty?
It's very difficult question because you have to see that there's privacy issues. Not only privacy, there's human right, abuse issues, right? And then there's also my concern is that when there's actual trial comes up, there's a prejudice effect. And what different from the U.S., Korea is kind of still have the kind of quasi jury trial system, right? It's not really U.S. system yet, but U.S. there's actually big impact on the jury because when they see the photo, oh, maybe actually there's the criminal, right? The criminal. So there's some prejudicial effect on that. So actually there was some concern, right? Also, I think that there's a different system in Korea because the Korean historically have very well set up fingerprint system. Compared to U.S. because I think U.S. is maybe only the criminals or unless you've been arrested or unless you apply for the federal job or the government job and the other person do not have, the government do not have the fingerprint. So there was no way they check it out. So, but in Korea, everybody has fingers. So you can have all fingers, not only 1 or 10 fingers sometimes, right? So it's very easy to track who they are. But I think that Korean mugshot law is more like concerning about the public safety. And then there's a sex crime issues, and they come out here because in Korea we do not use the death penalty, do not execute anymore. So people come out someday, and they're very concerned that they come back 10 years later or 15 years later, and they will try to track me down. So that's very concerned, actually. So also, it's not only one person, but people, actually it happened before, right? There's a, serial killer get out recently, and the people concerned that they want their location of their, serial killer right now. But he served his time, like 20 years in jail, but people still concerned, right? So they're concerned about the decrease of their property because this criminal live there, sex crime criminal live here. They try to people move out of their areas. It's a big societal concern also. So I guess that our time is the swing, the pendulum swings. Now people in Korea, they say we want to see what really happening, Plus, I think there's more different concerning happening in Korea. I said more concern is that in SNS, right? And people, they're changing their photo, right? Even the mugshot, they modify their mugshot. It happened in Korea already, and then they can make it look better or look younger or something, making fun of it, right? That's very concerning because there's a public record, right? So I guess that we need to keep it public because some people have some whatever motive and they modify it. Looks like different. That's very, very concerning. So I guess that now the area of now is time of SNS magic, but they change everything with the app, right? Free apps, right? So very concerning.
AI as well.
Yeah. So you have to get. I think the government should get like FBI, put all the list because I think the worst situation happened was that they modify people. Some people modified the photo, and distribute it. And this is the person, and they try to, targeting someone else who is innocent, right? That's I think, worst situation, right?
Which is very frightening, of course. And staying with that, Professor Hayes, what are your thoughts? Well, you spoke earlier about the circulation of mugshots online. And that being said, simply speaking, what are the broader implications of this reality of having mugshots available on social platforms?
Well, again, there's kind of pros and cons to it. We often think that it's somehow a deterrent effect. So part of the argument is, again, if the mugshot is there, And other criminals see that they want to escape, especially for 30 years. So they'll avoid doing crimes in the future because they don't want that type of public exposure. So they fear the long-term public visibility or social stigma. But again, we have very little evidence to support that type of deterrence position. I think it's more about what we're talking. It's more about public belief. If the public sees that image or the mugshot, then they truly believe they're safe somehow, or all of a sudden they feel resolved. They can start searching the society for that suspect or that criminal. So again, it relieves some of the public anxiety. And again, it leads back to transparency. It allows the people to keep a check on the criminal legal system, so to make sure that the right person is being detained. Those are kind of the pros of this approach. Again, what's most concerning to us long-term is privacy. Because again, keeping a suspect's picture online for that extended period of time, it prolongs their public exposure. And again, Korea is probably the world's most intensive in terms of internet connection and social media use. So once the image is there, it's almost impossible to remove. So it prolongs the public exposure, not only of the suspect, but we also have to think about the families, both the past, present, and future of those families. So, and again, in a society like Korea, more of a collectivist society, once we see that mugshot, then we associate it with the family. And that's the kind of fear factor involved here, is that in the US, we usually just focus in on the individual offender. But in the Korean system, again, we start looking at the family, and especially if they're embedded in a neighborhood, everybody's seen the image, they all begin to point fingers. It extends beyond the offender into the family. And again, it has ongoing impact on possible rehabilitation. So even if they're the offender and they get convicted and they get released, the problem is that photograph remains like a scarlet letter. So it's an ongoing stigma. It impacts their employment opportunities, housing choices. It will impact their social relationships. It has an overall impact on quality of life. And again, I think the biggest danger, if we go back over the past couple of decades as South Korea moved into democratization and they really began to champion the rights of the individual and the rights of due process, in particular, the notion that you're innocent until proven guilty. But as Mr. An said earlier, there's that presumption. As soon as we see the mugshot, we automatically project guilt upon the person. And that's the danger, is that we move away from the principle of innocent until proven guilty. And then all of a sudden, we start associating the mugshot with guilty until you're proven innocent. So again, what you're setting up is a system in which the individual will bear a social stigma for 30 years. And even then, it's unclear whether the image can actually be removed from the internet. But probably the most thing that disturbs me right now, as we're alluding to, is that people can doctor the mugshot. Youth enjoy making memes out of these types of pictures. It becomes a form of entertainment. So rather than protecting the public, it's now a form of misuse or entertainment. And in particular, I think about children involved. So their parent may be the offender. They have to go to school. All the other kids have their smartphones. And so those mugshots can instantly be used to do harm against especially children and teens in South Korea. And that's the great danger of circulating these mugshots and the use of social media in Korea.
Right, indeed. Ms. Tan, moving forward, another relatively recent initiative against crime here in the country is the requirement of convicted stalkers to wear electronic anklets. How effective has this particular effort been?
Well, there has been also debate about the electric anchors, because that is it really effective, right? And I remember watching some news coverage about that. Some people just broke it, the anchor, and kind of run away, and they got back home every hour, and nobody knew, and police didn't know where they are. And there's always, human-made. There's always some problems. You cannot make it perfect, right? So if you wearing the, maybe the electric ankle for like 10 years, maybe you know how to disable, or in a way, maybe learn by some tricks, how to do it. And so that's very concerning that I think that is more like the idea about the electronic anchors that prevent, about the recurrence of the same crime, right? So I think that's really concerned that it's more like it has to be more systematic rather than, making mandatory, require them to wear the electronic ankle is not the answer for the solution. It's more like you have to the police should have really the well-established system to tracking down in case that the plan A, the electronic ankle, they're not working properly, and they have to second plan, how to tracking back. And then also how they, to try to, to find him, track him back, very quickly. Because that's very concerning that, like crime like stalking is more like feelings, right? Something that you have tried to get out revenge that person, right? Because like, compared to other crime, you have a lighter sentence on, stalking. So you got out here like 6 months. You have no prior maybe criminal record. Maybe you got here maybe 6 months probation, something like that, right? So that, oh, you know what? I'm innocent, right? You pay back, right? Basically, that happens. That's very concerning because not only the stalking, other crimes that they say I'm innocent, but they just use the money to whatever. They hire a lawyer, expensive lawyer, whatever. They have many stories, right? That's very concerning about the, really attacking the social stability that, criminal systems that. So that's really, I think they pay more attention on how well they're systematically prevented rather than, apply on, heavily based on the only one solution like the ankle, like the electronic ankle. It's one way to do it, but we have to get plan B and plan P to prevent it, more effectively. Yeah.
Right. And for the sake of comparison, Professor Hayes, very briefly speaking, because I believe we have like about a minute left, what can you tell us about the monitoring using the anklet there in the US? Has it served to tackle crime?
I'm not sure it's tackling crime, but it's helping a great deal. And we're turning to it mainly because of cost effectiveness and our overcrowded prison system. So on comparison, in average, it costs in the United States between $100 and $150 to maintain an incarcerated person, whereas the cost for the ankle or e-monitoring is anywhere between $5 and $35 a day. So it's an enormous economic boost, right? It's a saving and a benefit. The other thing is because of our mass incarceration due to the war on drugs, it's beginning to help relieve overcrowded prisons. So by releasing incarcerated people, having the monitoring system, it begins to reduce our mass incarceration. And again, we lead the world in terms of mass incarceration. The other thing I think it helps with is rehabilitation and reintegration into the society. It allows people to go back to their families, to go back into the workplace. So instead of staying in a cell in a prison, they're back in civil society. And that's one of the biggest aids that helps with people reintegrating back into the society.
Right, I see indeed. All right, Professor Hayes, as always, thank you so much for your insights today. And Mr. An here in the studio, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, well, that ends this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching.